everybody. Welcome to another episode of Between the Sheets. I almost forgot the show name for a second. We are on the first and third Friday of every month here at the United Broadcasting Network here in the lovely city of Burbank. Don't forget, you can call in 323-524-2599. I have my lovely round table of women. I have Roxanne. Hi. Cara.
Hi.
Mara.
Hi.
I always put you two together.
I know,
it's
it's
Cara, Mara.
You got
it.
Delisha.
Delisha.
Yeah.
Delisha.
Wow. It's like Felicia, Delisha.
Yes. In the house tonight, by popular demand.
Yes.
Very popular.
Jenny
demand.
McNulty.
Hello.
Hey, Jenny.
We have Tony at the board.
Tony.
And I'm saving one of the best for last because she has an announcement to make, Ms. Kim Sanchez.
Woo. Hi, y'all. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the Regional Hispanic Institute in Long Beach. Tomorrow they will be honoring me as one of 8 Women of the Year at a really nice gala, and I just wanted to give a shout out to them and say thank you so much.
Yay!
Congratulations.
That's awesome.
Congrats.
We've been anticipating this show. At least I have. Anticipating this show. The topic is grief and loss. We have on Zoomy. There she is. How hot are you?
Hi.
Hi.
And you're tatted up and everything. And,
And hi to the person in the back.
And you're one of my people. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, Cara, can I borrow the book for 1 sec?
Certainly.
Because mine is on my Kindle. She wrote a book called Bearing the Unbearable, Love, Loss, and the Heartbreaking Path of Grief. Joanne Cacciatore, Ph.D. I'll read you what the Huffington Post said, because you just want to hear about this, because you know how wonderful you are, Joanne. Simply the best book I have ever read on the process of grief. Simultaneously heart-wrenching and uplifting. Ira Israel, the Huffington Post. Thank you so much for being our guest here on Between the Sheets.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yay.
This is so weird. You're our first Zoomer.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, first Zoomer. Every time I hear the word Zoom, because I'm old, there was this show back in the day called Zoom. And I don't know if anybody remembers it except me, and I'm just going to keep moving on. So in any event, you're a psychologist, correct?
I am actually a professor in the School of Social Work at Arizona State University, and I'm a tenured researcher there. So I'm a researcher and also a clinician. And so I for 25 years, had worked with families mostly whose children are dying or have died, but also other traumatic losses like the premature death of a parent or a sibling or a partner, spouse. So I don't generally work with like what we would call normal deaths or like grandma who's 95 who dies. I don't generally work in that area or research that area. All my research and all of my practice skills are focused on what we call catastrophic death.
Wow. It takes a strong person to really deal with stuff like that. I mean, I went to school, for psychology. I thought I wanted to be a psychologist or a social worker. And, when you're in school, you end up going and doing field work. And it was really heart-wrenching for me. I couldn't really disassociate. I would be so depressed and so sad that I couldn't solve the problems. So I felt I'd be really shitty at that job. So it really takes someone of strength and fortitude and balance. So why this area? How did you get into this? How did you start out? What was your background like?
Oh, okay. So, I got into this reluctantly. I lost a child in 1994. I have 5 children altogether, and I lost one of my children, my 4th one, in 1994, and it set me sort of on the path of a very, very, what I call my dark night of the soul. I weighed 88 pounds within a few months after she died and wasn't sure I wanted to live anymore, and thought to myself, if I survive this, I'm going to make sure that other families don't have to go through this alone. And because I felt very alone. I felt very sort of like I didn't have a lot of really good support after she died. And I had 3 little kids to take care of. And I thought, this is crazy that we have no sort of strong and compassionate social structure to help families going through this. So then I started a nonprofit which now has 77 chapters around the world. Our website gets 1.5 million hits a year.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
I started the first care farm in the world for traumatic grief, and we rescue abused and tortured animals, and the grieving families come here and they help us care for and interact with the animals.
Oh,
Wow.
Awesome.
And then of course this is my area of publishing, research and publication at Arizona State University. I run a program called the Graduate Certificate in Trauma and Bereavement there.
Wow.
Unbelievable.
You are an angel. I mean, you truly are an angel.
Oh, I'm a fucking demon.
Yes!
You're one of us.
You're one of us. Welcome to it. Welcome to the circle. I love your tats, too.
I have a wellspring of compassion for children and animals, and I mostly like people, but I have no problem. I have no problem engaging in fierce compassion to ensure that swift justice takes place when it comes to someone who is violent or harming another.
Wow. Now, I know Cara on our panel has actually read your book.
Yeah, I love you are an amazingly wonderful writer. I'm really impressed. It was beautifully written, very elegant, and obviously very sad. But my goodness, you had some very interesting points to make, especially about how people use platitudes because they don't know what else to say. And some of the things that people say, oh, you'll get over it soon, or isn't it time, isn't it time you moved on? Those kind of things, you have to. It's like you're in a group now, aren't you? You're in a group of people who understand.
It's a reluctant club, right?
Yes.
And I think part of where those platitudes come from is a place of wanting to help someone who's grieving, but it actually isn't usually helpful. It's actually usually really deleterious for people. It's actually usually really harmful. I mean, who wants to hear, when their 6-year-old dies of cancer? Who wants to hear, well, at least you have 2 other children?
Yes.
As if they're interchangeable.
Correct.
And
Right. Or God has a plan for you, but God didn't have a plan for me because I get to go home and tuck my children into bed.
Right. It's sort of like grief isn't really grief because it's like spread out evenly. It's interesting to me because grief, I'm usually really happy, and I the way I deal with grief is I don't deal with it. It's sort of like when I had suffered a loss of my grandmother years ago as a young adult, but I'm the person that moved 3,000 miles away, and I was always reluctant to get that phone call, and I'm an only child. Get on a plane, someone's dead, your mother or your father, and that actually did happen. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I got the call and I got on a plane, and my mother was a basket case. And I ended up just having to go right into work mode. I mean, they didn't even have they didn't have like the plot things, nothing. So my mother was like grieving, and I'm the one driving all around New Jersey, which, whatever, getting this all together. And I went through the whole thing. I did not cry till 1 year after. It hit me 1 year after. And everyone was like, oh, you just bounced back. And it's like, fuck you, I didn't bounce back. I'm just not dealing with the shit. And it was when I decided to take that moment to sort of feel. And I think, grief is a very powerful, and loss is a very powerful emotion, whether it comes from, death, loss of a relationship, loss of anything. It's a really powerful and debilitating emotion.
But I think sometimes it's also, I don't know, Joanne, if your book deals with that, and I do apologize, I didn't read it.
We wing it from here.
I lost my sister. We were estranged, and she was a drug addict. And the phone call came to me one day where she had been dead and cremated as a Jane Doe in San Francisco, found on a park bench. My mother was making that call to me. And then there's the whole grief and pain of could I have done something? And, I was practicing Al-Anon's tough love deal. And was that wrong? And there's just so much with grief. Besides the grief, now there's the guilt.
Yes.
Right.
Did you experience
there's so
that?
many layers, aren't there? Because it's rarely clean, right? It's rarely clean. It's rarely just the grief. There's the regret and the things we wish we woulda, shoulda, coulda done differently, or something we wanted to say and didn't get to say, or the sliding doors thing. If only I would have done this, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And so that's a very real thing with catastrophic death. Most people don't experience that in what we would call a non-catastrophic death. Again, no one expects their 100-year-old grandma to live to be 200, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen. But when you're talking about a catastrophic death, those are all very natural, normal questions and sort of like pathways of self-doubt that end up percolating to the surface for us. And, the reality is there's a writer, Catherine Porter, and one of the things she said really has been profound for me, that has stuck with me most of my, adult life that I've been working with grief. And that is, she said, the past is never where we think we left it.
Yes.
I don't understand that. Can you explain that?
Well, I was just going to say the reality of that is, for example, at the care farm, I see clients at the care farm, and I had a woman here at the care farm who lost a baby almost 50 years ago. She's in her early 80s. I mean, she was married 7 times, lived in 12 states, drank and drugged her way through the grief, and numbed herself out with gambling, lost houses. The reality is we can't run from we can run from our grief, but we can't run from the consequences of running from our grief.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we either learn how to stay with these painful emotions, which can, if we can fully inhabit the grief, can actually transfigure us and make our lives bigger, not smaller. We'll become more expanded versions of ourselves, and more courageous versions of ourselves. It's not worth the price. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Do not get me wrong. I would give everything to have my child back. Right. But here I am. So I either become a very small, contracted, and sort of, plugged up version of me, or I allow my heart to break and shatter open to the world, and I version of me. And for me, the only way to honor my dead child was to choose the latter.
Wow.
And so beautifully, may I just say.
Yeah.
And how many people have you helped? That's the most wonderful thing. I mean, I love all the stories of the people who came to you, and how you helped so many different people many years later, as you just said.
Speaking of helping people many years later, I have a question. So my mother was murdered when I was 30, and I was talking to these guys earlier, like you were talking about the platitudes. What I always get from people when I say my mother was murdered is, and to me, it's just really that makes it so much more difficult for me to talk about it, because I know that they are completely uncomfortable now and I cannot share my feelings. And I was telling them, I just got back from a trauma workshop where we were doing structures and releasing this stuff. And it felt so great that all of these people who have been extremely traumatized in their life, anytime I said, hey, my mother was murdered, they were like, yeah, so what's up? And I'm like, that's so awesome. Like, how does somebody deal with the reaction of people without, I don't want to get angry about that, but it's like, that's just a normal human reaction.
Well, sure. I mean, the horror of having to share with someone that your mother was murdered, or like one of my clients, her 3 children and husband were killed in a plane crash. So, I mean, when she tells that story, she gets the same reaction. Like people go, and, I mean, I think that, I don't know. I guess everyone is different and how you deal with it is different. So the opposite end of that is often what some people get as well. So we get some people who get no reaction. There are some people who really have a lot of angst because, they're somewhere and they say, oh, my 19-year-old was was killed by a driver, and this is the reaction that they're met with. Oh, okay. So do you have any other children? And treat it as if it's nothing. And so I think for everyone, it's different. I know that some people I work with who have rather dramatic stories that do elicit the big gasp of air. I know that some of those people sometimes choose to respond with, I know, it's a very big story, and it's okay to ask me about it. Some do, and some just withdraw, and some are not troubled by it. I think the thing about grief, I always say, is it's like a fingerprint. You recognize it as a fingerprint, but if you look closely enough, there are nuances that are so different. And so while that may upset and anger you righteously, it may not have the same effect on someone else. And so I think finding our own sort of way to talk about the things that we need from others in our grief, which is really hard, because then sort of the onus of responsibility is on the vulnerable person to tell someone else what we need, when in fact, we would hope that we live in a society that's compassionate enough that we don't have to ask for what we need, that people just intuit it and kind of know. Unfortunately, we don't live in that kind of world right now. Not yet.
It sounds like until you've been through something like that, catastrophic, sudden loss, trauma loss, that you can't. You just can't. I think I can see how, like earlier when Delisha told me this today, the first thing out of my mouth was, "Oh, you poor thing." And Delisha's like, "I hate that." She told me, she's like, "Oh," and she told me the story about how great it was to be in a room full of people, and I could totally understand how it would be. You'd feel less alone to be surrounded by people that have had such things happen to them, because then you don't have to worry about they're taking care of their feelings when you're,
that's exactly it. That's exactly it.
What then, excuse me, what then, as someone who has, knock on wood, I have yet to experience, true, as you're saying, defining it, catastrophic loss, what then is a good response? If someone is to tell me that someone in their family was murdered and they don't happen to say it was 30 years ago, for me to, there's, if that's fresh to them, for me to go, oh, okay, and I understand, and not give enough of a response. What feels good to you for us to do?
Are you asking me, or are you asking
no,
her?
whomever.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume.
Because I say I'm sorry. When someone says they lost somebody, I say I'm sorry.
I think I'm sorry is fine. It's not the I'm sorry that bothers me. It's it's not even the, oh, you poor thing that bothers me. It's the first reaction that bothers me. It's like, if you could just not have that, oh my God, what you're telling me is really going to affect my psyche and I'm going to have nightmares about it later. Like, then I don't want to talk about it.
I think that
it shuts me down.
Excuse me. I think that's such an important thing to know, because that's just not your natural reaction to that phrase. Someone, especially someone like my mother, was murdered. You can't help but take that in at a, oh crap thing. Right. So,
well, what do you think is the best way?
Literally, the only person that I don't even know this person that was murdered, and I'm not name dropping, but I was doing a show with Dave Navarro, and he took off his shirt, which no one minded, and he had all these tattoos on him, and he had one, and he was telling me, and he said, "Well, this is my mother's name. She was murdered." Wow. Now you're at a photo shoot. And it's surreal that you're talking to Dave Navarro. Yeah. I don't know. It was surreal to me. And he's explaining this to me. And I'm sorry came first. And then it was like dead silence, because I did not know where to go from there. It was like, okay. And then I think I said something about work, and we had to do something work-wise, because it was an uncomfortable position to me, because I didn't want to say the wrong thing and sound stupid.
Right. Well, and it's very awkward. And I think that, like, if we were to have a conversation, I have zero problem telling people exactly what happened, or what I know of what happened. But it was one of the, if not the, still to date, most violent crimes that Placer County has ever had. So I tell people, are you sure you want to hear about this? Like, for me, it's no problem talking about it. It's more of a problem for the people that are hearing it.
Because I think it's uncomfortable. And do you agree, Joanne? Maybe you don't. I don't know what I'm doing. But if someone says that, it's like, what's the natural step to say? Because obviously, I do have a curiosity. I would like to know, but that's just who I am because I watch SUV and I'm addicted. But it's like, what would be the next what would be the next thing after you say I'm sorry?
Are you asking me?
I am. I am.
I think everyone is different. You know, when someone shares with me their catastrophic loss, it's different for every single person because I'm not a robot, right?
Well, I will be and copy you. So please tell us what to say.
So sometimes my natural inclination is to put my hands on my heart and just go, oh, and just,
See, that feels nice.
I mean, there's something about this movement that just, I'm thinking about people, a client I had today and a couple of clients yesterday, and, just holding my hand on my heart and just when they say something profound and they share something deep and entrust me with the most important person in their lives. This is a sacred honor, and the loss of that person and the pain and grief that they feel, which is congruent with the love. It feels like, just my hands at my heart feels, it feels like it says more than words to me.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So-
That's a good one. That's a really
good one.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
I would definitely appreciate it more if people went, then,
yeah.
I mean, the reality is that for people who grieve to care about people who are grieving, right? And I think the pushback that you feel when people go, when you tell them about your mom is because they're making it about them.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What do you mean?
And I'm a
Excuse me,
huge empath, so that
But
affects
I
me
also
big time.
I disagree because if I were to do that to somebody and go, I would be how did you live through that?
Right.
That would be what I would be thinking when I gave
you
that
went-
reaction.
When you gave that
Agreed.
gas.
Yes,
I totally
oh
agree.
my
I
God,
totally
I
agree.
can't imagine going through that.
Right.
And how that must have been for you.
In some ways that's validating, and in other ways it still makes it about the other person because you're looking at it like so this some grieving people, and this is not true for all, but some grieving people really do not like it when people say, oh my goodness, you're so strong.
Oh.
I hated
Like-
that. I hate that. I'm one of those people. Boy, you're so strong. I'm like, fuck
Yeah,
you.
because
I'm not strong. I am dying inside. I just need to get through my goddamn life right now.
Right. It's like one day at a time. It's like this week has been one of the most challenging weeks for me, and I can't remember how long. And I just say, God's testing to see how strong my legs are today.
Oh, that's nice.
And that's how I get through things. I just got done teaching my MAD class, Mothers Against Drunk Driving class, last night. And one of the last videos that we show is a man who lost his wife and his 2 little kids to a drunk driver. The 2 little kids were ejected out of the vehicle, and they died when they were pronounced dead at the hospital. The wife was dead on site. How do you go on from that?
My
and
reaction is listening to you going, I'm going, oh my God, oh my
Right,
God.
yeah.
so it just, it's like what Gaye said. I'm not strong. God's testing with the strength of my legs today.
Okay, this sounds, especially coming from a comedian, that I'm being funny. But I don't mean. How would you react then to? Because honestly, from hearing all this, it's depends on the person. It depends on whether, 30 years ago, your reaction would have been different than it is now. So what would you feel like if someone were to say something and we were to, of course, I'm sorry with a gesture and just say, I don't know what to say? Is that something that feels like we're just sort of checking out and like, sorry, later, bye, I don't want to hear your problem? Or is it?
I mean, to me personally, yeah, it feels like that. If you say, I don't know what to say, versus just saying, I'm sorry, or my heart goes out to you, or something simple like that.
Okay.
So, Joanne, I mean, obviously, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, as we know, most of us know who she is. She wrote a book a long time ago.
Diana's sister?
Yeah, Diana Ross's sister. Yeah, she had 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. years later, because that was written a long time ago, do you think these stages are still valid that people go through?
Okay, so I should probably disclose my conflict of interest. Elizabeth was like a mother to me.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I
you know
love
what?
that story, by the way. That's so beautiful.
This, I'm just going to tell you, I obviously in school and college when I was going through my sociology and psychology courses, this was one of the books that we had read. I have always referred to these 5 stages anytime when I've gone through any type of loss. And I found it to be very applicable. I tend to stay in the anger a little longer. As I get older, the anger starts to, diminish. But wow, you knew her.
Oh yeah. I spoke at her funeral. Yeah, her son.
Holy shit, this is awesome. I didn't even know that. Okay.
I don't know. It's in the book. Though.
Tell
if
a
you read
story.
the book, you'll find out. So,
Do you always have
here's
that
the
reaction
thing.
to funerals, Gaye?
Oh, shut up.
And I think this is an important part. They're not actually the stages of grief. They're the stages of dying.
Okay.
So when Elizabeth wrote the book on dying, her primary work was with people who were facing their own death.
I didn't know
Okay.
that. I did not
And
know
so
that.
the DABDA model, denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, the depression, acceptance. The DABDA model was really for people who were dying, and she did not mean it as an inflexible stair-stepped model. It was sort of hijacked and became something that she didn't intend it. She said what most people experience that she sees when they're facing their own death are these things. And it somehow became like this gospel, you have to have anger before you can have acceptance. And that's not the case. And she didn't intend for it. That used to drive her crazy, by the way. That was a real problem for her at the end of her life. She was a little crunchy about that. So, I mean, I think it has a lot of utility as long as we're willing to be flexible. Yeah, a lot of people, and even in grief, a lot of people, some of the first things that people say, particularly when it's catastrophic, is, how could this be? How did this happen? What the fuck just happened? I mean,
right.
I have
That's
parents
me.
I work with. I have a client I work with who comes from out of state to work with me about every 3 weeks. And, every time she's here, she sits down and she says, what the fuck just happened? I don't understand how this just happened. Yeah. So in a sense, you could call that denial or self-protection, or I like the term emotional anesthesia, right? Where we're just sort of anesthetized reality. Thank goodness, because it doesn't hit us all at once. It hits us incrementally, little by little.
And I mean, for me, it's been 19 years, and I still say, "What the fuck just happened?"
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
And for me, I'm going to let you all know on this platform. I can now. I'm now in the Me Too movement, and I just think, what the fuck just happened, and I can't believe it happened, and I think I went into like denial and shock, and then after that, it's just sadness, like it's just uncontrollable crying, and I can't stop it. It's like I'm driving and then I just cry and then I'm normal and then I cry and then I'm normal. I canceled all my plans this weekend. The only thing I'm doing is this tonight, and it's not over. I have to continue with meetings next week about it.
So how do you get through something like this when you have grief or loss? I mean, what do you tell your clients? What's the first step to, it's not forgetting, but it's not even healing. I guess it's just moving. I don't even know what to call what that next step is when you suffer loss, to start to move on a path.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you actually corrected the word healing, because I think sometimes some losses that we experience are irreparable, and the word healing etymologically comes from a word that means to be made whole. And there are some losses we have from which we are never whole again, right?
Right.
And so I really rarely use heal because of the connotation. and sort of the origin. One of the things that I do, people will often come to me and they say, you know, you're like the expert. Like I have people who come from Cambodia and New Zealand and Argentina and all over the world to work with me. And my thing to them is like, I don't do anything magical. I don't have fairy dust, and I don't have people feel good or feel better. I help them feel.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that's what we have to do. I think we have to feel it instead of just, like you said, you dealt with it a year later. And that's just what I'm allowing. One of my friends just said, feel, and just stay in and cry and just do whatever you need to do to feel it. You know, I had a therapist tell me once, if you saw a baby crying, what would you do? Would you walk past it? Would you tell it to shut up? Would you just ignore it? No, you would hold it. You would comfort it. You would do everything that you can to make sure the baby stopped crying. Well, we are that baby. So why are we ignoring ourselves? Why are we treating ourselves badly?
Because if I may, sometimes the pain is so scary to face that, like, I even heard people, there have been stories, I don't know if they're true or not, about a broken heart syndrome. You guys heard this?
They're true.
Where your heart breaks and you die from it because it's that overwhelming and insanely hard to even picture. I mean, so I think the fear of feeling is probably, it's got to be so much better to have a support system so you don't feel like you have to feel it alone. I don't know if you have a support system.
But that's what I was going to say, Joanne. I mean, a lot of us, you know, we're all, you know, strong women, you know, and when a loss happens, catastrophic or... And that's another thing. I mean, there's obviously when you describe an accident or describe something, some of it is obviously catastrophic. But if it really, for me, depends on what's subjective to the person, because what could be catastrophic for me, if it doesn't look like a catastrophic thing, could affect me just as much as something that was an extreme catastrophe. That was a tongue twister right now.
You know what it is? It's the feeling, the loss that you actually don't think you're going to live through it.
Yeah, that's scary as hell.
You actually don't think your body can take it, your mind can take it. You're just going to break, and you'll never come back together.
And some people do, and so I'd like to know
but some of it isn't only just with death. I mean, there have been relationships that have debilitated me.
I know, but this is I mean,
But
catastrophic death is different still.
But Joanne, are we talking about just death, or are we just talking about grief in general? I mean, the emotion of it of itself.
Well, all the work that I do is around traumatic grief because of catastrophic death.
Yeah.
And not that there isn't grief that's associated with, and sometimes traumatic, with other losses. The problem when the person you love most in the world dies is it's irreparable and it's forever, and there's no remediation. There's no redemption. There's nothing you can do to turn back time. It's done, and it is irreversible, and that adds a different quality to it. And I think, you know, while I think certainly I've had grief associated with other losses, relationship and things like that. You know, the death of my child is a whole other, you know, different category where I didn't want to live anymore, and nothing else has questioned my will to live. So it for me at least, it was it's qualitatively a very different experience. Just sort of generic grief from losses, which are hard and which we should grieve and feel and experience. Absolutely. I don't mean to diminish that.
Right.
But the loss of your child or your partner or your parent or your sibling, you know, to death, it's a relationship that you can never get back in this moment, in this way, ever again. And there's something about that irreversibility that incites a sense of almost desperate panic in us. To get that person back. It's hard.
Yes,
it's inexplicable, really.
How did you, I'm sorry I didn't read the book yet. I'm planning on reading it after this. I'm not just saying that. I really want to read it. But I would like to know, was there a moment, since I haven't read it, I feel stupid. I don't know. But was there a moment, and when did that moment come up where you felt like you wanted to live again?
I wouldn't say it was a moment as much as it was a series of moments. I think I did the work. I went right into the hottest part of the fire. You know, there's a quote by a Thai forest monk by the name of Sant Cacciatore. And, you know, people seek transformative experience all the time, right? They go to ayahuasca retreats, you know, they're using hallucinogenics. They come to Sedona and they want to see God and experience God, and they want to have the transformative experience. And so Sant Cacciatore issued sort of a harbinger to people who were looking for that spiritual sort of numinous transformative experience. And he said, go ahead, ring your bell, light your incense, burn your candles, and call out to God. But look out, because God will come and he will put you on his anvil and fire up his forge and beat you until he turns brass into pure gold.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's
Heavy.
And
very heavy.
Wow.
Wow.
and the reality of that is we have got to feel it. We can't bypass it. We can't drug it away. We can't drink away. We can't porn it away. We can't eat it. We can't shop it away. We can't gamble it away. We can't exercise or yoga or diet it away. We have to be able to feel it and go right through the center of the fire, or that bypass will cost us in the end, and we will not become who we are supposed to become.
But can I say that in order to feel it, sometimes we have to go through those ayahuasca, I'm actually going to Sedona next week and seeing my breathwork lady who I love so
You know that's
much.
where
She's
I live,
amazing.
right?
I don't, but like my breathwork lady is incredible, and I'm so excited. I'm bringing somebody else there to help him on his healing journey. So I'm really excited about going, but at the same time, like, I want to ask you about like guilt around, so like my brother passed. He had PML, which he got from AIDS, and it was me that he said to me, "I'm ready, let's do this." And it was me that had to tell them, "Okay, let's up his medication. Let's start giving him the morphine every hour." And I feel like I had a hand in killing my brother. You know, because he was dead within a day. And it's like, how do you deal with that? It's not necessarily catastrophic, but
Traumatic
it's
as
a
hell.
little
But it is
overwhelming.
traumatic because, I mean, even with my dad, they came in and they wanted to make an appointment to pull the plug. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And I went, and my mother didn't want to pull the plug, and I had to deal with her. And I finally convinced her we had to do it because his body was just deteriorating in front of us. And
It's the most compassionate thing you both did.
well, we didn't do it because this was the weirdest thing. And like the day before we set the time to pull the plug, I made believe it was from New Jersey, so it was freaking cold. I made believe I left something in the hospital room, and I went back up, and my father was in a coma, hooked up to all machines, and I said to him, "Dad, I don't really want to do this. I just don't, and I don't want Mom to this be the last thing, you know, that gets done." And it was just really hard to make that decision to do life or death. And I said, if possible, I mean, I don't know if you even hear me. It would be really cool if it's your time, to just pass, like just die, you know? And I was actually much more compassionate about it, but it was like, please don't, because I knew I couldn't live with that, you know what I mean? And it was really hard. And I just felt this, I don't know, it was just this really calmness at that point. And when I went out to the nurse's station, I said, my father's going to die tonight. Don't call my mother's phone, call mine. And at 7:45, he passed.
Oh my goodness.
And I said, thank you, universe, God, whatever, because that's something, Joanne, that I don't think I could have truly lived with.
It's hard. It's hard. It eats at me every day.
Yeah, but you
know?
did the right. I'm sorry, but you did the right
That's
thing.
what everybody tells me, but
I mean,
it
I've
doesn't make it
I know.
easier inside knowing that I had a hand
No, I
in
know.
killing him
But he wanted
sooner.
you to do
Had you,
that.
yeah,
You
had
had
you
a
ever
hand
talked
in
to him about
saving
that?
him.
Seriously.
Had you ever discussed that with him and said, you know, because
No, not really. But I mean, he had PML. He wasn't getting better. You know, he had an open wound on his brain that wasn't closing. So I mean, he's not going to get better. And it was like,
But I mean, like earlier in your life, have you ever? I mean, I've always said I do not want to be hooked
Yeah,
up to anything.
my mom has
and
a DNR that she made me sign and put me in charge of.
I actually didn't meet him until I was 18 or 17 or something. So.
So Joanne, I mean,
Yeah, what
when
do you do
these-
with that?
Yeah, when you have your clients come to you, is it you? Do they mostly come sort of at the beginning of the loss, like the loss just happened, and then they come to you, or is it that they've been trying to feel on their own, and they just can't, and therefore they reach out to you to sort of facilitate them feeling?
All of the above. So they come to me at various points in their grief, from it happened today, literally, to it happened 50 years ago. But I mean, when I'm dealing with someone who experiences the sensation of guilt, the emotion of guilt, and even shame, I mean, to try to eradicate or provide solace around that. What I want to do, and the practice that I have, is to take them right into the center of it and explore it. Let's talk about what it feels like to feel this guilt, to feel this sense of responsibility, to feel the regret. And I'm not afraid of it. I'm not afraid of people who lose their will to live. I'm not afraid of people who have guilt and shame. I'm not afraid of horrible stories. I'm not afraid of people's suffering.
Wow.
And so I take them right into the middle. And honestly, you know, I work with a bereaved mom who she was moved, didn't realize her baby had, and she was holding the television and it got out of her hands and she dropped it onto her baby.
Oh my God.
Look, we all
And
just did that.
people said
we
to
all just
her,
did it.
Well, that's bad.
but this is important. People said to her, you shouldn't feel guilty. It was an accident. But the reality is
You do.
she felt guilty. And all that they did by telling her that was shame her
Yes,
and
absolutely.
tell her, don't talk about the guilt you feel.
Right.
Right.
I mean, the reality is that we as human beings, when we love someone, we recapitulate the events leading to their demise, and that's a normal thing. And sometimes that means it comes with feelings of guilt. Maybe I did this, and maybe I should have done this. And it's okay to feel even necessary, but we have to have a safe person in whom we can trust those kinds of deep emotional revelations with. And the reality is that when people who are grieving end up isolating themselves or end up looking like what they would call pathological grief, they socially withdraw, they lose interest in things that they had an interest in before, the grief looks extreme or particularly exaggerated given the context. When I ask those kinds of people, how is your social support and how much compassion do you feel from others? Most of them say, I have very limited social support and very little compassion, which exacerbates their sense of loneliness and the grief. And so we blame the victims because we live in a culture that I call it the happiness cult.
Yes.
We live in a culture that seeks happiness all the time. And all we want is to have fun and this hedonistic happiness chasing that we do. We only want to be around people who make us feel good. And that's what we seek all the time. Most of that shit is a house of cards.
Yep.
Most of that is just, most of the shit you see on Facebook, it's all fucking fake. It isn't real. People aren't happy like that all the time, but we hide how we really feel because we get those intimations from our culture.
Correct.
And so my big thing is just let people be with what it am a really fucking happy and I cry every day, probably, okay, if not every day, at least every other day.
But you said it was a series of moments that Was it in helping others through this that you felt your purpose, or you felt like you wanted to live? Was it your children?
No, no, not really. I didn't start the foundation for a few years. I really needed space to be with my grief. I really didn't want to prematurely detach from my grief by trying to help others when I was just a hot mess myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so I think, just little series of moments, I started doing anonymous for people, and like buying shoes for an underprivileged kid in a shoe store anonymously, and when I was doing that, I would hold my dead child's memory in my heart and say to her in my heart, I'm doing this because I love you and I want to bring that love to the world. And that's being called the Kindness Project. It's this big thing now that we do. And through my, ahimsa practice, through my practice of compassion for all. I mean, I'm a vegan and I haven't eaten meat since 1972. I'm 54 years old tomorrow.
Really?
Happy
birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And so for 47 years I have not eaten animals, and I try to let that be part of my practice, and that really helped me in my grief, connecting to animals and to vulnerable beings. And I tried to stay with my emotions. I cried a lot. I called myself a professional crier. I cried a lot. And I wasn't ashamed of my crying. I would cry and I wouldn't apologize for it. I remember going through a couple of therapists, and I would start crying and they would hand me Kleenex and I would say, I don't need these. I'm not cleaning it up. I don't want to clean it up. My child is worth every tear I shed for her.
Aww.
And I just felt what I felt. I guess that's the only thing. And that over time, I started building the emotional muscle. It wasn't like the weight of the grief diminished. It was that I got stronger because I practiced.
Uh-oh.
Ooh.
Did we lose her?
Did we lose her, Tony?
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Here you are.
Sorry.
There
You
are.
got stronger. You got stronger because you practiced?
I got stronger because I practiced carrying the weight of my grief. It's not that the grief got lighter. It's that I became stronger. I built my muscle by carrying.
But don't you think, Joanne, I mean, as we talked about fake book and people and this whole love, peace, and happiness movement going on, it's that, it really doesn't, it's not a conducive atmosphere for anyone going through any sort of grief to express their emotions freely. It's like everyone expects everyone to wear this mask. So,
That's right.
when we grieve, I mean, I always used to say for years, I don't cry. Well, of course I fucking cry in the privacy of my room in my house with my cat. I mean, that's my little crying time. But it's like this shame that you're saying to actually go out in public and see something that jogs something, and you have to and you tend to have to refrain because you're afraid of what people will say. And there's not there's no there really isn't any compassion with people anymore.
There's a time limit on your grief, and they just don't want to hear about it after a certain point in time. But you still feel it, and then there's no one to talk to.
Because I mean, people express it, because it's an emotion that it's 2, 3, 4 years. There's no time limit to when you can. It's not even move on. There's no time limit, and everyone is different. But I don't think everyone is really different. I think we all feel it, and I think it's a long amount of time. But I think it's the way society sort of imposes on us in our daily life of how to deal with it and how to keep it hidden. It's like, do you think? I mean, sometimes I think that the emotion for me was with losses in my life, and not catastrophic, but losses, is that you don't want to let that person go.
Of course not.
You don't. The memory, I mean, like, I was in a panic thinking, oh my God, I don't have my father's voice on tape. I'll never hear his voice again. I'll never, and I still, and I don't care what anybody says if I'm crazy, but fuck you, I don't care. There is some of I have his clothing. I still have I have pieces of him in my home that it's not like a shrine, because I don't have his aftershave and shit on a cabinet, but it's sort of it's kind of like by having his stuff, the last things he touched or the last clothes he wore, I still have him to some degree with me, even though spiritually, I'm very spiritual as well. And I know he's one of my guardian angels. He's with me all the time. So I feel that, but it is just really difficult to sort of, in my head was always, I'm never going to see you anymore. I'm never going to hear you anymore. I'm never going to get a hug from you anymore. And that was probably the hardest thing still now for me to deal with. And the thing is, and now I'm taking care of my mom. She lives with me now. So now it's the anticipation of, she's 87, she's going to die soon. And I had these thoughts when I was a little kid, sitting up in bed with these freaking nightmares, that I would be alone in the world because my parents would be dead. I would think about this when I was 7, 8 years old. And now, obviously, it's up to the point where it's now coming to fruition. And just, even though my mother and I don't get along really well, but it's that fear of, oh my God, I'm going to have to go through this death again. And I panic. I'm panicked. I am so panicked.
Me too.
That I know it's going to happen. It's inevitable. But I don't know how I'm going to deal with it, because then I won't have any of my parents here. It just freaked me out. It freaks me out, Joanne.
Can I ask how you think your response to your father's passing would have been had your mother been the strong rock? If you hadn't had to check out for a year and take care of her and take care of business, how do you feel that your grief response would have been? And as far as the other, don't you think we have a tendency to make our worries be these huge fear things that never completely, if you're actually usually even come close to the fear that we had, it's going to feel that way. And if you were able to go, okay, mom's flipping out, I got to do this, don't you think then that you will be able to find that inner strength or inner source?
I'll get through it. I'm strong. I'll know. I'm a Capricorn, for Christ's sake. I'll get through this. I did it once, and I can do this. But for me, I might as well tell everybody, I have abandonment issues. And there's another word that I'm purposely not remembering, but it's sort of, that really would hits home. That alone, that not alone in the world, because that's like, oh my God, how pathetic you are. But it brings up those, I guess, deep-seated issues of me, and everyone always tells me, Joanne, because my mother and I fight like cats and dogs. Trust me, any of my friends who have been on the phone, I don't mute. They hear the whole thing. And they're like, you should be nicer to your mother. She's not going to be here one day, and you're going to regret this. And I'm like, I'm going to regret not speaking my mind when she's being a pain in the ass. then whatever. And they make fun of, and people make fun of me because we fight like cats and dogs. And then like 2 seconds later, I'm like, I'm sorry. Okay. But that's a mother-daughter relationship. But the point is I think loss for me ties into that other psychological issue.
Well, Joanne, do you find that that's the case, that once a catastrophic death happens, all of those things inside of you are coming up?
Oh, sure. I mean, when people come and sit on my purple couch and start telling me about their partner or parent or sibling or child who died, because, as Catherine Porter said, the past is never where we think we left it. Their childhood traumas, their childhood losses, their view of the world, their sense of self, it all presents in there. You can, yes, of course, who you are before the loss, characterologically and experientially, certainly influences how we come to loss No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to reactivate all the triggers that you have in your life. And it's just now we have to go through this situation and then relive all the triggers that have caused the same similar feelings, and there's just so much to work with.
And it's interesting that even though you've lost one parent, like I would feel like, okay, I got through this one, so I know I'm going to be okay with through this one. That's spoken like a person who hasn't lost a parent yet. Mm-hmm. But yet it's like, I don't know, it's I don't remember what I was going to say. It's just, oh, I remember. It's just, no matter how many times you lose someone, it's unique with it, whether it's, right. You know, no matter what my cat, you know, my best friend I lost. So I guess it doesn't get easier at all. When you lose someone, I guess maybe you just know that you can get through it because you got through that one, maybe.
Well, I mean, for me personally, every death since my mother, and there have been several, has been no problem for me. Like, no problem. If I could get through my mother being murdered, I can get through anything. Like, and death is just a normal cycle of life. And I've learned to have a different perspective on it. And I've also learned to grieve in a different way. Like, for example, I don't mourn the day my mother was murdered, April 16th, 2001. I celebrate her last day of life. So every tax day I take off and I go do something that my mom would have loved to do. One day I just went to the boardwalk in Santa Cruz and played some game that she liked, and just little things like that I mourn in a different way than a lot of people do.
Yes, you do. Yeah, you are. I commend you for that. That's really
an awesome idea, actually.
Yeah. So, Joanne, when someone presents themselves to you, for whatever, how do you start the session? How do you sort of begin to crack that egg? How do you guide them through this? Some of your tips and tricks.
Honestly, everyone is different. I am the anti-protocol person. There is nothing that I do the same every time. To me, counseling should be like an art. It should be reflexive. It should be intuitive. It should always be, of course, compassionate, and should always contain the most important aspect of any good therapy or counseling, which is love.
And acceptance comes into it, doesn't it?
Acceptance of
just general acceptance of, as we were talking about earlier, of just sitting in the grief. And not
absolutely.
Running from
acceptance, no doubt about it. I tell people all the time, you don't have to accept that your child is dead, but it's important for you to accept how you feel about your child having died. Because then we start to get in an acrimonious relationship with our own emotions when we can't accept what our emotions are. We are a very emotionally unintelligent culture. The whole subject of mental health and our hyper focus on mental health, while completely ignoring emotional health, is really a sticker for me.
Well, and I think that the feeling something is really an important thing, and that basically was what this whole trauma workshop was about that I did, was actually feeling your feelings and feeling your body and knowing that you're in your space and just being present. And I think it's really difficult to do that sometimes when you've had such traumatic experiences. Sometimes you just can't get yourself to that point of feeling. And one of the things that I learned about through this workshop was somatic therapy, which I had never heard of before, to help some of the trauma and the stuck stuff in you. Is that something that you do with people as well?
Yeah, well, I don't have I'm not a tech person. So people come here and they tell me what they want from me and how they want to interact with me. And sometimes people want to stay in the four walls, and some people want to go stand with my horse, who, by the way, is a better therapist than most therapists I've ever met. I kid you not.
Animals are the best therapy.
Oh, yeah.
Horses specifically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So So we sometimes go on hikes together. Sometimes we're out doing farm work, lifting, heavy lifting, which is in a sense somatic re-experiencing, is very much about getting back in the body. You know, I tell people, how much do you sweat in a week? Sweat, body, sweat, trauma, character of trauma, back out of your body, you disembody because it's to be in it during the trauma. So get back into your body when you feel safe. And the one thing that I know about my work is that people, when they come here, they feel safe. Yeah. There's something about the space that we've created here on the farm. I don't have to cajole people there or to weep or scream or lay on the floor and sob. It happens. It comes out. It comes out when it needs to come out. I trust the process and I trust my patients.
Is that, do you feel, kind of like getting in touch with those feelings, kind of ultimately the only way one gets past this? Because for a lot of people out there, not myself, but I'm just saying, playing devil's advocate, there's going to be a lot of people hearing what we're saying and getting in touch with the feelings and get zen and all this, and they're going to be like, that's airy-fairy stuff, I can't do that, that's not me. I am, they just have never been that. Some blue-collar worker that's just tough, and how do you help them? When you see someone like that, do you try to get through them and go, hey, if you get in touch with that airy-fairy side of you, you're going to feel better? Or do you just say, hey, do you have an angle that you approach people whose level of comfort with the kinds of therapies and the kinds of healing or ways of feeling better that you do? That makes sense.
Yeah. So we just don't have an issue with that. I mean, we have one of our clients is a hardcore Vietnam vet, bearded, tatted dude, who lost his son. And, he comes here and he sobs like quite easily.
Yeah. But I mean, like the people that don't want to go to you, like, how do we reach them? How do we help if we see someone struggling?
Listen, I have no agenda to force people to confront their grief. If they're satisfied with their lives as they are, the contraction, the withdrawal, the sort of abbreviated version of who they are in the world, that's their choice. I don't have a need to have no agenda. People find me when they're ready to do the work.
And it could be, too, that they're just not ready yet to do it. They're not there yet.
And that's exactly what I mean. How do we help them then? If you see someone struggling.
Well, I think, yes, you have to help themselves. But for example, Joanne has a book. Joanne is going on interviews. We're going to take this. People are watching our podcasts. The word will get out there. But I think it's right. When someone's ready to do it, they will find a way. And that's with anything. If you want to figure out how to basket weave and you're like not ready, but then all of a sudden you're like, oh, maybe I want to fucking basket weave. Then you'll figure out how to fucking you'll find like a course in basket weaving. But I mean, the thing, Joanne, that I have a question for is, I think a lot of people suffer if the death happens suddenly. It's like, oh God, I should have said, I should have done, I could have done. There's so much I have to say. In the work that when you work with people, how do you guide them through that? Not the guilt, not feeling guilty of, I had a fight with my husband in the morning and now he's dead and I couldn't say I'm sorry. How does one get through that? How do you work with someone with that personal guilt?
Yeah, I help them feel it. Like I just apology letters. I let them cry through it, express it. I don't tell them don't feel guilty. I don't assuage their guilt or try to assuage their guilt. I try to create space for whatever is with them. And there are people who are very, very terrified of feeling their feelings. Those are the people who are probably not going to come to me to do this work. If the day comes when they're ready to stop living a small life, then they'll find a way to come and do the work. But no one can really do that for them. I can't do the work. If someone comes and if I give someone sort of grief homework to do, and they come the next week and they say, oh, I didn't do it. I go, okay, no problem. Where do you want to start today? I don't have the need or be, my goal is to make people compliant. It's not my pain, it's their pain.
Right.
So, I help people stay with what is. I help them process it, experience their bodies, in their minds, in their emotional selves, in their spiritual selves sometimes, and in their interpersonal space. And I help them, sometimes I help them kind of with practices and coping practices. But it seems to be pretty good. We have some preliminary data from the Care Farm intervention, which is our relatively recent intervention for 20 years, 5 years actually. Farm intervention is 3 years old, and we've been collecting preliminary data, and our initial studies are really, really exciting and hopeful in terms of the data. We're really helping people quite a lot.
By providing a safe space, by just letting that person know that they can let everything go in your presence and they're going to be okay because there's no judgment. That's the biggest thing I would think you would provide to someone, and the biggest gift, because that's something they can't find, in people that are like their friends or whatever. It's what you're providing is a safety net to feel what they're dreading to feel.
It's not just a safe space, it's a safe, neutral space.
Correct.
That makes a big difference.
Now,
You're
Joanne,
offering them the kindness. I love your kindness project. Sounds so clever and wonderful, and so touching for everyone involved. And I think it's also you're giving them an outlet with your pets and your horse that you saved. I love that story. It's beautiful.
And I think one of the important points here is this idea of a safe place is incredibly important, because people who have trauma do not feel safe. I mean, the defining emotion underneath all trauma is fear.
absolutely.
Subjective. You don't have trauma without fear, okay? And so let's talk about the emotion of fear. When people feel safe, they don't feel fearful. And so they come here and they're not fearful. They feel comfortable to share. And so they emotionally divulge, but then they also, in very practical ways, for example, thing that they've always because not everyone will understand this.
Right.
Oops, did I drop off?
Yeah, you did. Can you go back now? Go back.
I get terrible Wi-Fi in Sedona.
You're not kidding. It's all the vortex energy.
Yes, I've been to every single one of them.
There's more.
So where did I lose you?
You were saying that they feel the whole safety thing,
And fear.
fear and trauma.
Right. So they're not fearful when they're here, and so they feel safe to divulge emotionally and explore emotionally. But they also feel safe to explore other things. Like, for example, and not everyone will want this or choose this, but I have some people who want to read the autopsy reports of their loved ones.
I did.
Interesting.
And
I read every single line. It was very important to me to know that.
I would too.
And it actually helped me, because my mother's left ventricle and her heart was 75% clogged. And my chiropractor said to me, I know your mother, and she was like a warrior type. Do you think she would have rather died saving your stepfather's life or dying of a heart attack on the kitchen floor? So reading her autopsy report really helped me deal with her grief.
So continue, Joanne, about the autopsy.
Or just feeling safe.
So sometimes they want to look at death scene photographs. And my job is not to discourage or dissuade them. My job is to create space so that whatever they need to do for their experience, even if they're from it, dealing with it together, and I help them through it with them. I don't make decisions for people. I don't tell people what I think is best for them.
So, Joanne, I have a question for you. You are there to deal with everyone else. When you were going through your own grief and fear, did you do it as a family? Who did you turn to?
Oh, back then in the early years, I didn't really have anyone to turn to. So I was really alone, which is why I started the nonprofit, right? Which is why I started my NGO. You know, my animals have been a source of comfort for me. I had dogs back then, and I guess I would say my dogs were safe, and my 3-year-old daughter was safe. I had a 3-year-old daughter at the time, and she was wiser actually than most adults in my life. In fact, one time I was on the couch and I was weeping because I was grieving. It's probably 2 months after my daughter died. My other died, and my mother had come over to my house trying to be helpful. She knew I wasn't functioning quite as normal. And she was very frustrated because I hadn't fed the children a proper breakfast yet. And, you know, I was being sort of castigated for that. And when she left, I felt, you know, this shroud of shame come over me because I thought, oh my God, my child is dead and I'm starving my other kid. And my 3-year-old, so I'm crying now more, and my 3-year-old got up on the couch and put her arm around me and she said, Mommy, it's okay to cry and it's okay to be sad because babies aren't supposed to die.
Oh, wow.
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 So I would say my 3-year-old and my animals were a source of comfort back then, but I didn't really have a lot of support. Thus, I started our nonprofit group, for example, we have Hope Mentors. It's called Helping Other Parents Endure. And so we connect grieving parents to other grieving parents who are in similar tragic circumstances. And so if one parent lost her child to drowning and we have a new parent whose child drowned, we connect them to each other. And so we try to find as much support as we can for people so they don't have to endure this, you know, hell alone.
Wow. So how long has your organization been in motion?
Almost 25 years.
That's awesome.
I think you said it before, but I think you cut out. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Almost 25 years. Yeah.
And what's your next step? What's your next book? What's your next goal? What's your next hurdle?
There's a lot of shit to clean up in the world, isn't there?
A lot.
Yeah. I don't have the next book planned yet. I have a 10-course class online for grievers that's available through my publisher, Wisdom Publication. So, you know, not everyone can afford to come out here to Sedona and work with me because, you know, hotels out here are expensive, etc. It's like 10 or $15 a course, and they can take a course that we guide through each sort of 10 classes is about grief, a lot of psychoeducation, a lot of experiential work. It's like counseling, but on the cheap. So it's great. And then the Care Farm, we want to expand the Care Farm. I want to continue my research with the Care Farm and really expand. And I'd love to see Care Farms rescue animals in Care Farms all over the United States and all over the world, helping people, because the last place I want to see a grieving person stuck is in a psychiatric hospital.
Absolutely.
I would much rather outdoors in nature with green trees and with a dog licking her face or a horse brushing a horse, you know, taking care of their whole body and whole soul and whole mind and whole heart.
Wow. You are an enigma. Is that a word? Enigma? Does
that mean mystery?
Does that mean a good thing?
Yeah.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you mean it is a good way.
I do. I mean, I don't know what the fuck that means, but I think you're that. It's better than an enema. I mean, really.
Depends on what you need, Gaye.
I kind of got it in the right format.
Well, in a way, she does get everyone to get stuff out of them.
She purges them.
Yeah.
You are the great purger.
You're an angel.
So, I mean, you're in Sedona, all that spirituality stuff, which I believe in, even though I'm just, you know, casually brushing it. Have you done ayahuasca?
Oh no, I'm already there.
Yeah, like that.
Well, I did, and all I did for 8 hours was sit in a ball, and it was all about fear. It was literally all about fear for 8 hours because I had to vomit, and I wouldn't vomit. But it just culminated in vomiting. And for 8 hours, I struggled not to. Now I vomit at will. But at the time, I did not. And I sat there, and it was very interesting because it was a progression of, and I've never done hallucinogenics. And that's the funny part is I never did mushrooms. I went right from nothing to the grand finale of shit, okay? And my mother paid for it. I said, Mom, I need $300. She said, why? I said, I want to go on this spiritual journey. And she said, you're going to do drugs? It's not drugs, Mom. This is really a spiritual thing. And she said, fine, because I wanted it for my birthday, and she did. And it was, I think I've told this story, I don't know on how many times over the air and what incarnation of this podcast, but it was really interesting that when I finally decided to surrender, because that word kept coming up in my head, it was fear versus surrender, and that was the struggle for those hours. When I finally said, fuck it, I'm gonna vomit, I will surrender, it was the weirdest shit. It was like a fire pit was right here, and I felt this fire, feeling like it was singeing my esophagus, just coming up. And then I finally threw up. I felt so much better, but I was I thought maybe it was like psychosomatic, that feeling of heat and fire. Absolutely not. I was completely drenched, and that really changed my life. In that, I'm still fearful of things. It's not like it's a miracle that happened. Someone put hands on healing. It just was, I now see fear differently. And I go now head on into things without that skepticism. I still overthink, but I still do it. And I keep going back to that. That keeps me in check to go, there's nothing for you to fear.
The fire puke made you stronger.
The fire puke made me stronger.
But I have a question. Why is it beneficial to do a drug? Why can't we just release this on our own? Why do you have to do a drug?
Can I take that one?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've done a lot of work. I've had a lot of trauma, and I've done a lot of work, including some natural ways to get to the same point. So I did this thing called Toad, which is basically the venom. And I was able to go and, I went to some place that I would have never been able to get to without it, where I actually went to, the underworld, and I was able to confront my sexual abusers who have passed on, and it was insane. My brother was in there with me. It was an insane experience. He said at the end that he thought the cops were going to come, that it sounded like a triple homicide in there. My throat was sore. I don't know what happened. But then I've also done breath work that gets you kind of to the same place. But I think however people need to do their trauma healing work is how they need to do it. Ayahuasca scares the living shit out of me. And I don't know why. I could do toad venom, but I'm not going to do ayahuasca, which toad is actually it's the strongest hallucinogenic on the planet. And it's big time scary. But ayahuasca scares the shit out of me. But I think that sometimes, and breath work scares the shit out of my brother, because he was like, whoa, how does your body get to that without any drugs? So I think it's just a matter of how people need to heal their trauma is however they need to do it. And if it's natural drugs and the drugs that you do in the Amazon, and you have a different relationship, it's not a drug, it's a healing modality, a tool.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What do you think, Joanne? Weigh in.
So I mean, we're we don't at all.
You're breaking up.
Anything. We don't. What? Oh, yeah. Just a minute. My back.
Buffering.
My back?
Yep, you're back. Buffering.
Okay. So, kind of a community do drugs, alcohol, or anything that changes consciousness here chemically. And that's I don't imbibe in anything. I'm oppressed. So I don't judge people. Just do whatever you got to do, right? But the reality is most people, when they come here, have that experience without the drugs, without the chemicals. Like they really do. They have the experiences here. I worked with a young man whose brother died down by the river. So we're on the river, and I took him down by the river and I took him into a meditation. And I didn't know what was going on for him. He very, very much missed his brother who died. And I was just sitting there with him, holding space in meditation with him. And I heard him sobbing. And I mean, he was just drenched from the tears. And I just, you know, I don't interrupt. I go, well, I'm trusting the process. And when it was about 30 or 40 minutes, the meditation ended, and he opened my eyes and he's like surprised to be where he was. And he said, thank you. Thank you. I just hugged my brother. I saw him. I talked to him. I hugged him. No drugs, no nothing. I mean, it's when you feel safe and you can open your heart and trust, you know, sometimes these things happen. So to each his own. What we do on the care farm is really we're pretty earthy here.
Yeah.
You know, we're pretty grounded. I don't discount the veracity of some of the Sedona healers. It's just not my thing. I trust in the power of nature, the power of compassion, and the power of love to help people.
I love you, Joanne. We're coming down. The Between the Sheets girl, they're going to rent one of those RV things, and we're going to go glamping.
Oh, glamping sounds great.
That would be a hoot, because my you know, you said this was girls' night. This is my girl here.
Oh my gosh!
Let me see her girl. Let me see her girl.
Listen,
Is this? Wait a minute. Is this the 3-year-old that turned into a woman?
No. This is my good friend Angela. Her last name is De Benedetto.
Oh, another one of my people. Another one. Italiano. Yay. Well, awesome. I want to thank you, Joanne, for joining us tonight and giving some insight. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, my name, JoanneCacciatore.com. SelaCareFarm.com is the Care Farm URL, SELAH, carefarm.com. And then if you've lost a child, the MISS Foundation is a great resource, MISSfoundation.org. Sela Care Farm is for anyone who has had significant loss. And my website, JoanneCacciatore.com, has lots of resources for grieving people.
You have been a pleasure, and you're hot. Just saying. I think the lesbian consensus around the table is you're hot. You've got great tattoos. I get it. I'm one of you.
Thank you.
And the bearing the unbearable, love, loss, and the heartbreaking path of grief. You can find that Amazon, right? Yes, no? Amazon.
Bestseller.
And you're welcome to come back anytime. And if you come to LA, I would love to have you here, as opposed to looking at you. It looks like an episode of Max Headroom, and no one remembers that but
I
me.
do. I do now. Yes.
And thank you so much for your insight, and the organization that you want to have with animals just all around the world. I'll be interested in helping you. So I can call you offline and we can figure something out, because I really love that and do believe that's amazing. Yes. And I think I can hook you up with some people that can maybe carry that along. So thank you for what you do for the animals. Thank you for what you do for everyone. You really are an angel and a sweetheart. So thank you so much for joining us.
So great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. I could have talked to her for hours. I mean, I kind of wanted to pick her brain, and say, so tell me more. But she's just, I mean, if you look at her, I mean, besides she's hot, obviously I have a crush on her right now. But it doesn't take much right now either. But she doesn't look like that therapist. She's just really kind of cool. She's laid back. She's spiritual in a way of here, not so much the woo-woo type of stuff. But I'm not kidding you. We should go down.
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
never been to Sedona.
I've been. It's amazing.
Oh, it's amazing.
You know what? When you
Is
go
it?
down, you should
Amazing.
reach out to her.
You should.
I will. I'll send her an email.
Yeah, send her an email.
I'm going
reach
to have
out to
somebody
her.
with me. Casey and I are going, and we're going to have a healing weekend. So.
Wonderful.
Well, you better. Well, you'll have to bring back a report, but go see her. She's really cool. Anybody else have anything else happen this week that they want to? Besides you getting some big fucking ass award, anybody? How was your show last night? That we
thank you.
all
It-
blew off.
Yes, you
because,
blew me
I
off.
know,
I'm not
I'm
telling
sorry.
you now. Forget it. No, you had to get there. You had to get out there. And I'm going to tell you how amazing it was.
How was Suzanne? Everything good?
It was wonderful. It was
Can you
really,
just
really
get
fun.
your? Why can't you do shows up here?
I just
Hey,
did
I
one
like
last
her in
month.
Ventura.
Yeah,
Well,
see?
I
Ron,
live in Orange County. I
Yeah,
need
but-
something a little closer.
But look, here's the deal.
You really need laughter, too.
Yeah, exactly. What in Orange County? But I mean, why can't you do something up
I
here?
do every now and then. I was just at the Improv last month, the beginning of the month. So
Oh, you
every
didn't
now
tell
and again-
us. Oh, wait, we didn't really know you.
There's that.
Jenny, do you do Gays R Us?
I do
you
that. That's
one?
what I just did. Yeah, I just
Oh,
hosted it for
cool.
Aaron last month.
Oh,
Oh,
nice.
Aaron Foley.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good one. We should all do that.
We should
Yeah.
all
So
do
much
that.
fun.
What is Gays R
Absolutely.
Us?
It is the first Wednesday of every month at the Improv.
Off on
and
Melrose.
It's gay comedians, and it's fun.
So you don't do it every month?
Not every single month, no.
How
Actually,
come?
when we first started, it was myself and Aaron and Jason Duty, and it was all three of us. We did every month, and then Aaron just kind of took on.
Jason
You mean
Duty.
sometimes
Yeah,
you're
that's
not
right.
paying
In
for
itself.
a comedian?
It's
Right?
a duty.
Yeah.
Jason
But I'm going to be at
Duty.
the Tampa Improv on December 8th, Sunday, December 8th. So if you're in Tampa,
Tampa,
see
Florida.
us. It's an afternoon show because they're all down there.
Yeah, you know they
4
are.
o'clock at the
in
Tampa
I
Improv.
thought they were all in Miami
Yeah,
and Boca
Miami.
and
Yeah,
Fort
it's
Lauderdale.
everywhere in Florida.
Why
Everywhere.
is your Jersey
All the
accents coming out when
Midwesterners
you talk
come.
about Florida?
What?
She
Both of your
started
Jersey
it.
accents came out
I don't even
like
have
heavy.
one. I'm
She's
from the
from
Midwest,
the
for Christ's
Midwest,
sake.
for
I
Christ's sake.
sound like this if I sound like an accent at
Oh,
all.
that's
No,
the
I
best
talk.
accent.
I
in the
talk
world.
like I'm talk like from New Jersey. Of course I can. Why not?
Uh-huh.
So anybody else? What are you doing? What's coming up for you besides another three-way or some shit that you do, Roxanne?
right now,
Which I think you should always bring us up to date on.
right now, I'm just at a halt in my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rest.
I'm painting my kitchen.
You're painting your kitchen.
That's
I
why-
so wouldn't help you. I hate painting. God bless you. I
nearly
absolutely hate that. Ugh.
Amara Shane?
Oh, I am. Well, I'm painting and not painting a kitchen.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
I have like 5 projects going on in my head right now, but yeah, mostly just more painting.
Well, where are we going to be at? We're going to be at the String Quartet, most of us.
Grammy Museum.
Grammy
I think
Museum.
that's December 4th.
Fun.
We've got the LOL party.
And December 5th, the girls at Whiskey A Go Go.
Yeah.
Whiskey a
Whiskey
Go Go. We're going to
Oh,
go
yeah.
see Cherie Curry
gonna
and
be
Bree
fun.
Darling. That's going to be fun. And even if they don't want us up on that stage, we are
We're
going to
going
get
to.
up on that
They
stage.
said we could.
They did.
They
I,
said we could.
I hold them to it. Then we're going to the Cyndi Lauper thing on
yes.
December 10th. We do things in packs now.
Except go to comedy shows.
No, no, we will. I promise we will go to the next one.
Hands full.
I worked. I work on a
teasing
new
you.
show
That's all
called
right.
Game
You know
On.
what? I don't even like driving up to Ventura. I don't blame you.
Although someone told me they took a Lyft or an Uber from LA to Ventura, and it wasn't that much money.
It's
Really?
like $60.
Yeah, it's not
roundabout,
that
yeah.
much
It's
money.
not that
I mean,
bad.
you would
Wait,
think it'd be
round
like,
trip? That's
no,
only 60? Oh,
no,
one way.
One way.
Oh, that's a lot to me.
That is a lot.
Well, but if a few of us go, I mean, how does that work? If there's like 3 people or 4 people in the car, do you they charge you different
No,
times?
you split
just
it.
split it.
Yeah.
So that's not a lie. We should do that. We,
I
we
don't
should
drink. I
Really,
could
guys,
try.
Ventura is not that far.
Yeah, I'm
Jeez,
too-
No,
From
it
Orange
isn't.
County, it is, man.
No.
not.
Look,
It's like a 2-hour drive.
It took me
it's
an hour
not.
to get here
With
from
It is a
traffic.
2-hour
When
drive.
there's no
With
It
traffic,
is a 2-hour
yeah.
drive. Without question, it's a 2-hour
Yeah, it was
drive.
2
At
hours.
that time of day.
And
I have been doing it for 10 years
just
every
telling
month.
you.
It is a 2-hour drive at
Because
that
you're-
time of the day.
Because at that time of the day, yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's why. I mean, I got out of work. I wasn't sure when I was going to get my photo shoot done, and when they said it was going to be 5:30 or
Oh,
6,
yeah, you didn't. No, nope.
I would have met you for drinks somewhere else because I would have totally missed the show.
If you'd been on at 9, I would have come. But like getting rush hour to go from where I was, it was like 2.5 hours. It was 2.5 hours in the afternoon, and I'm like, oh, 5 o'clock. That's gonna be like 4 hours. To
I know,
get
it was
there.
crazy. It's
I
just
just
ridiculous.
can't.
But Ventura is a beautiful place.
It really is.
So,
It's just too far.
Okay,
act
everyone.
like
I
it's-
think we're done, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. It's so funny how we went to like so intense to so like
Not
vomit,
intense.
not intense, and just like, okay, this was too much to handle. Let's just be stupid for the last 20 minutes. Everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of Between the Sheets here at United Broadcasting. You can follow me on Instagram. That's Cute Brat. We have Facebook pages, Between the Sheets. YouTube. You can catch the video portion on YouTube. We're on iPodcasts and all those other friggin' things. I need a social media person. So if anyone wants to work for free, help me. But we will be back on December 5th, 6th. Hold on, I don't know. We'll be back on December 6th. And on that show, we will have Celeste Barbier on. You know her, right? She will be showcasing her new EP for us. First, we'll hear it. And I don't know. I'll figure out who's going to be in the room. We all may be here, maybe not. I want to wish my condolences and my love from Between the Sheets to Valerie Milano. Her mother passed away this week. She was supposed to be sitting at this table. So I do want to just say we love you. And if you need anything, please call us. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you. Thanks, y'all.
We are who we are, and we have the numbers because of you guys, because we certainly don't have the money to pay anybody. So I want to thank you for being here. I love you. I'm in gratitude. Namaste. Have a great week and a half.